All right, hey class, welcome to week 5 and what is take 2 of this video, because did I get to 5 minutes into a recording and realize the microphone was turned off? Yes, I did. So starting over now, hopefully you can hear me. I want to take this time to talk through some of the things that we've done to catch up a little bit on some housekeeping issues, and then we'll move on into the next project and into week 5. So there's a couple things that I want to address before we move on. Number one, it seems like all of you, for the most part, had an okay time uploading your draft. The drafts that I did have a chance to look at seemed very good. And so I think that that went pretty smoothly. If you do have any lingering concerns or anything like that, obviously let me know. The other thing that I want to talk about is the peer review. Now, some of you had problems with, either getting your drafts done or whatever it might be. Or not done, but uploaded properly, or finding your group or whatever. And so I'm going to try to sit down and think about a way to make that more streamlined. It'll probably end up, what I'll probably do is just spend some time doing a dedicated peer review video just to walk you through that process. I do want to address that. I've noticed that on some of the videos that covered some of the things that people had questions about, there weren't many views on the videos. So make sure that you are watching the videos before you kind of get upset or not get upset, but before you kind of get flustered because you can't figure something out. Watch the videos, okay? They're there for a reason. Okay, the other thing that I want to talk about is, I know I have some grading to get back to you. Project 1 is a pretty streamlined grading process, so I should have all that back to you by the end of the week. Okay, so what I want to do today then is I want to talk through Project 2 and week 5. You will notice under week 5, if you looked at it before I recorded this video, there was a rather lengthy reading. As you'll see here in a minute, I've cut that down in order to more closely focus on the work for the week. So give me 1 second to pull everything up and then we'll get going. Okay, so before we dive into week 5, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the Project 2 assignment sheet, assignment description. That's the word I was looking for. So let's take a look at this. You will see that Project 2, just like Project 1, is not, in fact, a typical essay. Now, I promise we will write an actual essay at some point in this class, but this one is pretty streamlined. So if you did look at week 5 and you see that we are running right into a rough draft for this week, you're about to see why. It's not an essay. If you've ever done an annotated bibliography, that's essentially what Project 2 is. So let's take a look. So for Project 2, we're going to begin doing some research and some synthesis. Now what that means is we are going to be using the texts that you maybe cited in Project 1, or some of the questions that you developed, those research questions at the end of Project 1. We're going to be using those to launch into a more focused investigation of the discourse community you chose. Now, this will all become more clear in a second, but that's where we're going. So this first process is going to be conducting some research, and then we're going to be using a few different tools to help us bring it all together to see how all of the research fits together, and that's the synthesis part. So let's take a look. Now, in this project, you use your findings from your research guide, Project 1, and your genre analysis, also in Project 1. Remember when you were talking about the different components of one of the genres that your community uses? For an exploration of a research question that is current and appropriate for your community. And so it could be a question that you came up with at the end of Project 1, or it could be that you develop a different question as you start to investigate some of the things that you're curious about in terms of your community. More on that later. Using your peer-reviewed academic article from Project 1 as a launch text, means just our first text, you will locate and explore a research question by finding and annotating 8 sources, analyzing and color-coding these sources, and producing a synthesis map of your 8 sources. Now, let's break that down a little bit. You're going to take that article that you found for Project 1, you're going to look at its works cited page, you're going to take a look at some of those articles because they are all going to be talking about the same kind of topics. You're going to annotate those in a way that I will show you in a moment. And then you are going to create what's called a synthesis tree or a synthesis map. Essentially, it's a word cloud, like the bubble with the lines coming off it. We'll take a look at all this in a minute. So I'll let you read the prompt, but essentially all we're doing is a kind of a longer annotated bibliography entry. So what an annotated bibliography entry is, It's a works cited page essentially, but then for each source that's cited on that page, you have a summary of what that source says, so just a quick paragraph, and then a summary of how it either fits into your project or how it addresses your research question or how it relates to the other sources you found. So essentially it's 2 paragraphs per entry. Okay, now this will all become clear in a second when we take a look at it. So you'll see the minimum requirements. You're going to do 8 of these entries, and they're called Cornell Notes, and I'll show you why. Cornell Notes are a system developed in the 40s at Cornell University, and it's a system for research and taking notes that allows you to really quickly and effectively catalog all of your research, remember what you're talking about, and pick out the most important things. So I'm going to drag over just a quick picture to show you what Cornell Notes look like, and this is essentially it. So you have a piece of paper, you've got a column here, column here, column here. And this big column right here for, so you'd have 8 of these papers, right? 1 for each source. So in this big column, you would give us some notes, some of the major things that stuck out to you while you were reading this. Over in this little thing, you would give us some kind of keywords or whatever that relate to these things. So the idea here is if you have a paragraph or 2 over here of notes, and you want to be able to sift through that really quickly, you might just create like a little blurb or like a little code or a little symbol or whatever it is that helps you sort through this. And so, for example, in my research, I'm doing something with, race in the Renaissance, and I have an article, and there's a lot of stuff here. I might just jot down a quick, like, boom, 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 like, here's point 1, point 2, point 3, or here's like a keyword that I pulled out. And so that way, when I go to write an essay later, I can just cycle through my notes and say, oh, this is the keyword that I was looking for, and it tells me all of what's in those notes. It's just a way to help you store and catalog and become a better researcher, okay? Now we can take a look at more of these. So here's another, maybe a better example. See if I can get, yeah, so here's the Wikipedia entry. That's a really good thing to use. It's as good as we're gonna get. There we go. So again, same thing. So we've got the name, your recall column is that kind of keyword column, your summary of the article, and then just the major points that stuck out to you. So that is what a Cornell note is in a nutshell, okay? Get that out of there. There we go. Did I just delete the wrong thing? Pause. Okay, I'm back. So that is what a Cornell note is. You will do 8 of those. So essentially you will have 8 notes or 8 sources, and you will have 1 of those entries for each. So kind of the major points on one side with some keywords in a column and a quick summary of the source on the bottom. You're going to do 8 of those, okay? And that's the bulk, and that is project 2, okay? And that's why there's such a quick turnaround. What you'll do after that is we'll talk about color coding and synthesis. So basically, the color coding will help you kind of figure out what sources best fit together. And so, for example, if you're doing, in my case, race in Renaissance literature, I might have 2 sources that are talking about like the colonies. I might have 2 sources talking about, racial oppression or whatever it is. And so I would do like blue maybe for the colonies, red for oppression, and that just helps you sort them out. So that's what we're looking for. So just develop your own little color code. And then in a synthesis tree, I'm sure you guys have probably seen these before. It's literally just like a word map, right? So here's what we're looking at. And so you will take your research question essentially, and you will kind of lay out each of your 8 sources. So it'd be source 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The line coming off of what they are each talking about. So source number 1 is talking about this, 2 is talking about this, and they all relate back to this tree. Now the idea here is that you'll lay them out in a way that helps you figure out what sources kind of most closely fit together. I'll show you some examples later on in the week when I upload that rough draft video. Because I have some really good student examples from previous classes that might be handy. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Okay, for now though, what I want you to start to do is I want you to start to take that first article from Project 1, look at the works cited page, and start to read or follow some of the sources that they're talking about, and start to kind of go down the rabbit hole and see what you come up with, because that's the first way to kind of start to conduct some research. Now, there are other ways to conduct research that are really valuable. For example, using the library's databases, using the library's research guides. So if you go to the library website, or if you're able to go to campus physically, I don't know what your schedules look like, go into the libraries, talk to the librarians, and get in there and start using the databases. Now I will kind of talk you through that more at a later point, but you know, start to look up those major topics that your project one was discussing. Okay, so that's a quick overview of project 2. We're just doing a works cited page essentially, so start to do some research on that. Okay, now I want to get to week 5 to show you one of the changes that I made. Okay, so you'll see here we've got a couple things. Read chapter 6 out of the Wordsworth guide. You don't know that my book's over there, that's why I'm pointing. And then this is what I changed. So initially this was that Creswell couple chapters from his book, pages 1 through 77. I changed that to this article. It's a really interesting article from, it's hosted on LinkedIn, but it essentially does what that article, or what the original reading did. So it's just going to give us a breakdown of different research styles, methodologies, and approaches and things like that in a much more kind of entry-level, user-friendly way. And so that's why I want to go with this. So take a look at this. It'll help you wrap your head around the different modes of research. And these are all modes that we will employ at some point in some way, shape, or form. So this is a really good one to read and kind of have in your back pocket, not only for this class, but you know, for college education in general. Okay, so take a look at that. And then you can see we do have a draft of this due. So all I'm looking for this draft is I'd like to see, you know, at least 3 solid notes. Remember, your drafts never have to be complete. I want to see, you know, just 3 entries. So give me 3, you know, articles with some major points, with your keywords, with your summary of the article, and I'll be very happy with that, because that'll help me and your peers understand, okay, this person either does or does not kind of understand the project or whatever. So if you can do 3, you're in really good shape. Okay, so just to recap, take your article from project 1 that you found, start to follow the works cited page by looking at those sources if you can find them. If not, start to use the library's database, start to use the library resources, Wayne State's resources, and use your research question as a guide, right? Use the topic that they're talking about as a guide. In fact, I'm going to show you just real quick. Okay, I'm just going to give you a quick refresher if you haven't used this in a while, and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to go to our library's website, and if you have some databases that you've used in the past, go to those for your field. If not, come over here to your research guides, and what you'll see is that the librarians have collected a lot of different material for different fields of study, right? And so whether it's business or children's lit or chemistry, whatever it is. So find the one that most closely relates to your topic, to your discourse community. And so we'll just go for fun, economics. Here's the librarian that is in charge of these resources. There's a different one for different fields of study. So you could email her to ask her questions about where to go to find different sources, or a lot of times what they will have is, let's see here. Sorry, I had to pause it because it took me a second. So again, what you'll see here is they will have different databases that are appropriate for this. And so I could go into here, plug in my research topic, and so I think we're in the business one, that's what I picked. And I would just do gender in the workplace, or something like that, right? And you'll see here that it gives us lots of results, et cetera, et cetera. So use those research guides. Find your field and use that as a way in if you're having trouble. Now, I'll this week, since we are working so quickly for a turnaround, I will be posting more frequent videos. So I'm going to do one on Wednesday about doing research, one on Friday about rough draft, stuff like that. And so keep in mind, there'll be 2 more videos this week that will explore these things in more depth. For now, though, just start to do some research, see what you come up with, and start to take some notes, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.